Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath because this is the morning of the Sabbath. We had the evening yesterday and today is the morning. Remember they said the evening and the morning were the first day, second day, etc. So we are going to be reviewing the book of 2 Samuel from chapters 1 through 24. We begin with David getting the news of Saul's and Jonathan's deaths, and he mourns. Also, the young man who brought the false report of killing Saul was killed himself foolishly for his lies. Then we see David going to the cities of Judah, and he is anointed king. And Abner, Saul's captain, decides to instate Saul's son Ishbosheth as king. Even though he knows David is going to be the next king. So there is war between the two armies, Saul's armies, David's armies, and Saul's and David's army, and Saul's army is defeated. Abner kills one of David's soldiers. Abner is the captain of Saul's army. One of David's soldiers by the name of Asahel, who was the brother of David's captain, Joab. And a truce is then called between the two groups because David's army was conquering Saul's army. Then Abner is accused by Ishbosheth of going into one of Saul's concubines, and he gets angry with Ishbosheth because I'm sure it was true, and decides he's going to go over to David's side against Ishbosheth after he instates him. So he goes to see David, and when Joab learns of his visit, Joab is David's captain, he goes after him to kill him to revenge his brother. And Abner, I'm sure Joab also believes Abner was a traitor, which he was. He was. So David mourns Abner's death and curses Joab's house. Then the two men of Saul's house kill two of Saul's captains, kills Ishbosheth, Saul's son, who was pronounced king, and takes David the news, and takes the head of Ishbosheth over to David, thinking that David is going to be happy with them to learn of his death. But David is not happy with them, and very similar to the young man who brought the death of Saul, David had these two men killed also for killing innocent blood, as David referred to it. So that's the end of that reign as king. So now the other tribes of Israel, knowing that Abner is dead, Ishbosheth is dead, decide to go over to David and they anoint him king. And David now decides he's going to move from Hebron, where his previous station was. He's now going to Jerusalem. The Jebusites, which are one of the Israelite groups, decided they don't want him still as king, and he had to go to war with them, and he slayed them, and he fortified the city which they had and called it the city of David. He was honored with gifts from other kings. He took more wives, he took concubines, and then the Philistines heard of his anointing as king and decided they're going to go fight against him. He prayed to God. God gave him instructions. He followed them, and he had the victory over the Philistines on more than one occasion. Then David decided to bring up the ark of God out of where it was in the house of Abishai, I think, to Jerusalem. And he got new oxen, new cart, and everything. And while it was being transported, it shook. And one of the men carrying it, named Uzzah, decided to try and stop it from toppling over. That was not supposed to be. No one but who God instructed to take the ark, which were the priests and the Levites, they alone. So he died. When David saw that, he got scared. He said, you know what, this is too much for me. So he decides to leave off the ark in the home of one of his men called Obed-Edom. Don't know if Obed-Edom requested that, but he decided that's where it will stay. And God blessed that man's household. So when David heard of all the blessings and good things coming to Obed-Edom, he decided, oh boy, well, I guess God has kind of forgiven my whatever happened, with the touching of the ark. So he decides to go bring it up now into the city where he is. And while they were transporting it, they were dancing and they were playing music, all in reverence to God. His wife looked out and she saw him, because he may not have been wearing much, and she disdained him, it said. So she was not happy and she scolded him for his behavior. And he recanted to her, hey, this is for the Lord, and if you don't like it, well, tough, because I'm going to be doing this. And she remained childless for the rest of her life. I'm not sure if it's because she was struck and barren or if he did not go in onto her at all. But that was the end of that. Then things were quiet for a while in Israel. And David decided, well, you know what? Now we have the ark here. I better build a house for God. And God kind of dissed him and said, you know what? I bought this since the children of Israel came out of Egypt and were going through the wilderness. This ark has been there and I've been fine. I've been dwelling in tents with them and appearing to them. And yeah, I don't want you to build me a house. So he sent the prophet Nathan to tell him, you know what? Let me see. He sent the prophet Nathan to tell him, I'm not going to have you build me a house. I'm going to choose your seed after you, and they will build me a house. But I will establish your house forever. And he helped David to build his palace, and David was happy with that. Then David had more conquerings after wars with Moab, Syria, the Philistines. He dedicated all the spoils to God. He shared the spoils. He dedicated the spoils. And he also started putting aside materials for the building of that house for God, whoever came after him. Then David asked about Saul's descendants because he wanted to honor Saul's descendants because of his agreement with Jonathan. Remember, he and Jonathan, Saul's son, were good friends. So they had one young man by the name of Mephibosheth who was in transport with his nurse, running away from these captains who were killing Saul's people. He fell at the age of 5 and he got lame. So he came before David, and David decided to honor him, and he instructed a man by the name of Ziba to look after Mephibosheth's estate, and commanded Mephibosheth that he should eat at the king's table, which was a great honor. So that was great. Then they had the Ammonite king, whom David knew from before and had helped David. He died. When David was fleeing from Saul, he helped David, but he died, the king, and his son was now in charge. So David sent his servants to take condolences to his son. But the son listened to his advisors and decided to treat the men as spies, cut off half their beards, cut off their clothing up to their buttocks, left it exposed. So the men were so disgraced. And of course, David was very angry. So he decided he's going to war with the Ammonites. They hear about what happened and they flee to the Syrians to help them. Called on the Syrians. The Syrians came out, but Joab and his men formed serious bands in front and behind, and they were conquered. Then they brought out more armies, and David and all the Israelites decided, hey, we are going out to battle these Syrians. And they again, God gave David instructions after David inquired of God, and they were defeated by the Israelites. So now David is free from war, but I think he sent his captain Joab out to fight a war, and he stayed home, hanging around the rooftop. You know, they say the devil finds work for idle hands and minds. Sees a woman bathing herself, learns that she is someone's wife, but still decides to send and take her, lie with her. She becomes pregnant. Then he tries to set up her husband to make it look like it was the husband's child. And when the husband refused to go home to his wife, then he decides he needs to get rid of him. So he sets him up to battle up front and let everyone go back and leave him to be killed. He dies, but his name was Uriah. His wife's name was Bathsheba. And then David sends and takes the man's wife. God is not happy, of course. God is so displeased with his actions and decides, you know what? That child is going to die and your house is going to be in turmoil. The sword will not depart from it. You're going to have evil coming from within your house. And your wives going to be taken by someone else in front of everyone. Everyone will be seeing it happen. So the child dies after David tried to intimidate God to, try to implore God to change his mind. God didn't change his mind. But then he had another son by the name of Solomon. And they say God loved Solomon. So then within the household, David's son Amnon decides he wants to have a relationship with his half-sister Tamar, because they have the same dads but different moms. Pretends he's sick. I call it a fatal attraction for her. There is no love in this, okay? Pretends he's sick, has her come over to cook a meal for him, sends everyone out, forces the girl to lie with him against her wishes. She's, protesting it, but he, of course, may be stronger. And when he's finished, he's still not pleased. He had the attraction up here. And then she now is defiled, goes about mourning. Her brother Absalom takes her in. And then within 2 years, he had it plotting all the time. Absalom was a devious one. They said he was beautiful to look at, but he had a devious mind. He sets it up that his brother gets killed, okay, at some feast he was having over at his house. David grieves about what happened. He's upset, first of all, with what happened with Tamar, but he does not reprimand Amnon. So that's why Absalom took it into his own hands to deal with Amnon. So he's grieving after Absalom, because after Absalom has Amnon killed, he runs away. Of course, he's afraid what will happen. Until Joab goes to David and has David agree to bring him back to the palace, because David is grieving over Absalom and Joab sees it. So he's not allowed to see the king's face until after 2 years. Absalom decides, well, this is enough. I'm back here. Why you brought me back then I can't go before the king? So again, Joab has some old woman pretend to have some situation, but it really is relating to David and Absalom. And then finally, David agrees, okay, fine, bring him. And he comes before David. David forgives him, kisses him, and all seems well. Until 40 years later. See, Absalom takes his time. And he watches what's going on, and he is plotting in his mind. So he goes against his father. He wins the heart of his people by sitting in the gate and listening to all their complaints, etc., and kind of putting them against his dad. Finally, he decides he's going to go into the city and take it over, make war with David. David runs away from Absalom. And now the two armies, David's and Absalom's, go to war. David tells the people, do not kill Absalom. Don't harm him. But Joab says, you know what? Absalom got his hair caught up in a tree. A man saw it, went and told Joab. Joab said, why didn't you kill him? So Joab goes back, finishes the job, he and his men. And David is not happy. He mourns Absalom. He cries, Absalom, my son, my son. And the people feel so badly because of what has happened that they start to back away. So now Joab goes to David and said, you know what? This is a shameful thing. We did what we did for your sake. Absalom was your enemy. Now you think you're treating us as the enemy and he like your friend. So David kind of pulls himself up. He goes in the gate of Judah. He sits, and the people of Judah decide to reinstate him as their king. Oh boy. Now, while he was running from Absalom, there was this one relative of Saul called Shimei who came out and started throwing rocks and cursing at David. But David refused to have him killed. As a matter of fact, later on, he pardons him for his actions. He said he wouldn't have him killed. So then David, David decides to make Amasa, who was Absalom's captain over Joab instead of Joab. I'm not sure why. So Joab was not happy about that, and while they were at war, Absalom's group and Joab's group, or after the war, I should say. Joab he is pretending to greet Amasa, and they were relatives too. I think they were cousins also, and kills him. And then he goes after this man called Sheba, because while they were reinstating, while Israel and Judah were reinstating David, not everyone agreed. And some of the Israelites went against it. And Sheba was the man who headed up those Israelites, and they were following him. So Joab went after Sheba to get rid of him. Sheba ran away and into this village called Abel. And this old woman looks over and says, "You're Joab, you come here to destroy this whole city. Why?" And he tells her, "It's just after Sheba I am. If you will send me his head over the wall, I will turn around and go away." And they did just that, threw his head over the wall, and that ended the feud between the two groups. Now there's a famine in the land, and David somehow, well, I think he confers with the priests or the seers, and it is learned that it's because of Saul. When Saul was in power, he killed the Gibeonites. Now the Gibeonites had an agreement with the Israelites. Even though they had tricked them into pretending they came from a far land, the Israelites had agreed to spare their lives, and they made them their servants. But Saul, for some reason, was killing them, slaughtered them. And they asked for revenge on seven of Saul's sons. They hanged the 7 sons, and that brought the famine to an end. My gosh, like I said in the Bible days, it was blood for blood. Yeah. Okay, now the Philistines are defeated again. They are always coming up against the Israelites, but David is with God. God is with David, I should say, and they are defeated every time. And David has time of peace to sing praises to God and to kind of recount his days as leader of these men who fought against the Philistines and helped to win their battles. So they had peace at that time. Again, God gave peace. That's why they say when a man's ways please the Lord, even your enemies are at peace with you. So now amidst all the peace they're having, David decides he's going to get up and count God's people. This was not something sanctioned by God. So God sent the prophet Gad. Well, Joab was trying to dissuade him from doing so at the beginning, but of course, he's king and he refuses to listen. So God sends, after it's done, God sends the prophet Gad to tell David, you know what you did is not right in my sight. You have a choice to make among 3 punishments: 7 years of famine, 3 months of pursuit by your enemies, or 3 days of pestilence. Of course, he didn't want to fall into man's hand. He didn't want to be running again from any man. He knew how it was. So he takes the lesser days and what he may think may have been the least of the punishment, which was the 3 days of pestilence, unbeknowing that it was not just going to affect him and his household. It affected the entire nation of Israel. 70,000 men died from the pestilence, till he cried out to God, and God repented of his judgment and stopped the angel. He even saw the angel who was there to do the avenging. And God sent the prophet Gad to tell him to raise an altar up and offer sacrifices unto God. And that is how the plague was stopped from Israel. And that was the last chapter of 2 Samuel, chapter 24. Wow, quite a number of happenings. Oh my gosh, all around David. All around King David. So now we are going to be moving into the first book of Kings. After 2 Samuel comes 1 Kings. So we're going to be learning more about some of things with David and then after David. So that's what Kings will be giving us. So thank you all once again for listening. and commenting. Thank you for the comments I got. I think one person told me that they think they would have chosen the pestilence for David instead of the other two punishments. It seems it was the shortest duration, 3 days, and the pestilence, I don't know if David thought it would just be for him and his household, but it affected the entire nation. But you know what? God is so merciful in everything. We have to keep trusting. So keep on listening, because faith does come when we hear God's word. Take care. Bye.